people tell the difference between God's voice and the devil, which makes us think it came from God?
Yeah, oh, that's a very good question. When I think of it, and because I'm a preacher, so I always refer to scriptures in terms of, first of all, it's not easy to distinguish or discern between God's voice and your voice and the devil's voice, really, honestly. In fact, you think about Peter, who traveled with Jesus for 3 years, and Peter is on the ship, and Jesus is on the water, and Peter says, Lord, if it is you.
Mm.
Now, you would think Peter, who been hanging out with Jesus for 3 years, because remember, Jesus is walking on the water and stuff like that, and he's giving them an invitation. And before Peter steps out of the water, he used that word that many people forget, and that's the word if. Lord, if it is you, let
Mm.
me come to you on the water. Now, here's what I'm convinced of, sis. If Peter, who hanged out with Jesus for 3.5 years, still cannot distinguish if it is the voice of God or if it is God out there, you know, we,
Right.
we, we, we got a bigger if, because we haven't walked with him physically or literally. And so it's a challenge. But one of the things I learned to distinguish between the voice of God and the voice of the enemy, or our own inner voice, is one is of faith and one is of fear. Because
Mm.
whenever God speaks to us, it's a faith challenge. Whenever the devil speaks to us, it's a fear challenge. It's a fear. Your fear paralyzes us, where faith moves us forward. And God is an encourager. He's not a discourager, and He's a lifter and not a pull down or tearing down. So I always tell people that's number one. The second way you can distinguish between the voice of God and the voice of the devil, the Bible said, in the multitude of counsel. And
Mm.
of course, I mentioned, Bishop T.D. Jakes, Pastor Jenkins, and then my mother in the ministry, Rita Twigs. I don't make any decision. I don't make any decision without talking to one of these three people, because one of all three of them is God's voice in my life. Somebody say, how does God sound like? He sound like Bishop Jakes, he sound like John Jenkins, and he sound like Rita Twigs. And you have to know the people that God has connected you to, who can speak, and you like, wait a minute, that's God's voice. It's like when it's storming, your mama says sit still, because
Yep.
God is at work, because the thunder and thing, they know the voice of God. And so that's what helps me. And I think that helps people. Make sure you have people in your life who are in tune with God's voice. And when they speak, it is God's voice.